Well, good morning. We are back for another episode of NFL Fantasy Matchup. All of us are getting prepared for our draft. Actually, speaking of draft, there are some teams that just drafted last weekend that I was looking at Instagram. I'm surprised they're drafting so early because still a lot of training camp battles, a lot of free agents still that can be signed that may change the outlook of the team. So, as usual, welcome Jed and Jimmy.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I hate that too. I don't like being in leagues that draft too early. In fact, even our league, one of our leagues, I think we're the week of August 20th or something. I love getting into September. Like that's perfect if you can draft right before that starts because there's so many injuries that happen leading up, and man, it stinks if you drafted someone and they're already injured before the season started.
Yeah. The other thing, though, I don't know if you have this in your league. There's a number of commissioners I work with who haven't even started anything or set the dates. And I get frustrated by that, too, because when you have two drafts in one night and both of them are auction, it's frustrating,
Oh, yeah. And because we have wives who, are like, you're doing what for the fourth time in a row?
No, yeah. Like that week in August. And part of the reason why I said it there, I've got 3, right? If I push it back towards the next few weeks, Sarah will kill me because she already thinks I'm on these things way too much. And I've got 5 more drafts after that.
Well, for the sake of your marriage, we're happy to draft a little early.
Well, the worst commissioners are the ones who don't even ask anyone about the dates and they just throw a date out there. And you're sitting there, I have another draft on that day. So just do it earlier if you want to throw out a date.
Yeah. The best draft, one of the hardest drafts I did is I was on a plane. I forgot where I was going to, and my draft wasn't working because it's just too hard, right? So I was texting someone to draft for me as they were doing it, but he had his wife do it, and she kept missing the players that I drafted. I was getting so mad. Because it's a whole dynasty league, right? So she's like, which one do you want me to get again? And I was like, forget it. After a while, I was like, I'm just going to let the auto draft do it.
Yeah. The funny thing is sometimes the auto draft will actually end up doing better than you. I mean, those things are getting better and better. And that's funny. Just thinking about all the AI in the news, I haven't heard about anyone. I should look up to see what people are doing with AI and drafting, because that would be a really smart, again, a lot of times those auto picks do end up doing better than you can do yourself.
Oh, let me just say this. I've been trying to figure out ChatGPT does not actually give you anything on fantasy football. So if you go to ChatGPT and it says, give me the trends in running back from the last 5 years, it says, we do not predict anything or blah, blah, blah. And please look at ESPN for more information or something like that. I've been trying to do different manipulations of that on AI. If you could figure out the verbiage that could get them, let me know, because I have not had any luck in it.
I will do that. The ChatGPT is a huge thing at work. Being in the marketing industry, it's basically at the forefront. I was telling people we required full training for all 6,000 plus employees 3 months ago on AI. So that's how big it's become.
Oh, Jed, if you could figure out the verbiage to use with ChatGPT to give, I could not figure it out. I tried different manipulations or different verbiage for it.
Did you know that that's actually a degree now? You can get a degree. It's called prompt programming. And it's basically how do you ask the right question to like a ChatGPT? That's a degree.
Really?
Yeah. I was telling my son going to Purdue, I'm like, man, you got to get into this AI field because it's so new. There are jobs that will be there for you when you graduate in 4 years that don't exist right now. And that's one of them. An AI prompt programmer. You can look it up. That is it's one of the hottest things.
I have this friend who works for Microsoft, and he was coming up with this idea. He was talking to me about it. He wants to start a business that essentially does consulting for companies for AI. And so it'd be to train their employees on how to use all the different AI apps out there.
Yeah. Jim, literally, I know you do a lot of social media for NFL Fantasy Matchup. I actually was going to sit there and come up with all of these social media posts. So I asked ChatGPT, give me some social media posts for fantasy football trends for 2023, 2024. And it just would not do it. So I was trying to figure out what the verbiage was to use.
Yeah. I wonder what you're using for your prompt. So I just did summarize the top running backs in the NFL over the past 5 years, and it's listing them out.
No, but I think he wants them. I think Tommy's trying to ask him to ask it to pick for him. Like
No,
actually,
so it won't. Yeah, it definitely won't do. Remember, ChatGPT has only data loaded up to 2022. Has no
Oh,
2023.
2022.
Oh yeah, it cuts it off at 2022, and it intentionally will not push anything into the future. So if you try to say, XYZ in 2023 to me, it will not do that. But it can summarize for you anything up to 2022. So you could definitely get, like if you wanted a summary of like the top backs, before then, you should be able to get that.
because
Got
I
it.
asked them to tell me the top running backs, and they gave me McCaffrey, Henry, Kamara, Barkley, Cook, Elliott, Chubb, and Jones, and those are all running backs based off of 2022.
Yeah, it's all
I
only up to
do-
2022.
I do wonder if my verbiage is wrong when I say, give me the top running backs in fantasy football. And so I wonder if that one is the one that throws it off.
Yeah, it could be.
Maybe, yeah.
All right.
Anyways,
Hey, let's go through a couple of things that I want to at least go through in terms of news and notes. Let me throw you some headlines, and I want to see what your thoughts are. Lions to sign Teddy Bridgewater as their backup. Panthers, this actually
Wait,
affects us
Lions?
in favor-
Was it Lions or Miami?
no, Lions.
Lions.
Oh, okay.
This actually affect our Bears as well too, because we have Carolina's draft pick. The Panthers signed Justin Houston because he was rumored to be someone that the Bears were looking at as well too, coming from Kansas City. And third one, Eagles again signing two veteran linebackers. You guys will recognize two of the names: Miles Jack and remember him, fantasy stud Zach Cunningham. Thoughts on these signings?
Well, Miles Jack too. He was with the Chargers previously, right? I think that guy was really good too. So
Jacksonville, he did really
Jacksonville,
well
yeah,
during his
okay.
years in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim, any thoughts on any of those teams?
No, not really. I mean,
Yep.
it'll be interesting to see how Teddy Bridgewater does, but I mean, actually, Detroit's slated to be number one in the NFL Central. So it'll be
Hey,
interesting.
the only reason I'm paying attention to Carolina, I want them to keep losing, and losing because there's a stud wide receiver by the name of Marvin Harrison Jr. that I really would love for the Bears to draft because I think that alongside DJ Moore would really elevate the team.
I mean, I don't think actually who is it? They said Bryce Young has been doing okay. He's made a number of mistakes, but do you really think Thielen as well as Chark is going to last an entire season? I think they're just putting them in as holdovers. I don't think they're really taking the season that seriously.
Yeah. Jed, hey, three teams are on Zeke Elliott. The Cowboys, Patriots, and Jets are still highly interested in pursuing Ezekiel Elliott. At the end of the day, who do you think he'll end up at?
Wow, I have no idea. That's really interesting. I personally wouldn't be interested. And I keep hearing Dalvin Cook still to the Jets. I still keep hearing that, which be on the lookout for that because if you're thinking Breece Hall, then that definitely changes things. But yeah, with Zeke, I don't know. And I would hate if there's any running back you're targeting and then Zeke signs up, man, that's a bad sign because he's gonna get something. He's gonna get some carries, but that guy for years has not his per carry average has been terrible. So I feel like he's not someone I would.
But here's the thing, right? And these days, sometimes you don't need those yardage, right?
Yeah, it's split carries. Yep.
Yeah. Like I'm trying to remember which team does Devin Singletary play, but they were talking about how their biggest worry for that particular running back is Singletary is going to get the bulk of the red zone carries. And I can see, depending on where he goes, Zeke Elliott might do the same thing as well, too. Almost playing that Jamal Williams role that he did for Detroit last year.
Yeah. Hey, I still remember, I'm not sure if you guys remember this guy from the old fantasy football days. Natron Means back in the days would always get it from the 1 or 2 yard lines. And he was there in the early days of fantasy football. And I would just play him all the time because he would just run in and get 7 points right there.
That's a good flashback. There was also that the San Francisco who was that? The San Francisco guy that would plunge in for just like 1 yard.
Frank Gore?
Yeah, Gore was one.
All right, yeah.
One.
Okay, so Devin Singletary, I mean, we'll talk about running backs later. Devin Singletary is playing for Dameon Pierce. Mm-hmm. And the coach has already come out and said that he can see Singletary being the red zone running back, but Dameon Pierce has still got the bulk of the carries. But if you're looking at drafting mid-level running back, he's someone I would worry about.
Yep. Jim, Colts are signing Kenyon Drake. That doesn't really matter. More so, a lot of times, at the end of the day, what's going to happen with the Jonathan Taylor situation?
I mean, I think he'll play. I don't think there's any options. I don't think they're going to sign him to a long-term contract. That's one of the reasons why I'm hesitant to draft a Saquon Barkley. I'm hesitant to draft a Josh Jacobs or even Jonathan Taylor, because for me, like, they're not going to want to get nicked up. They're only on a 1-year contract, right? And so why would they want to put their bodies out there? So are they going to go for the full slate of games this year? I don't think so. You might get them for like 10 to 12 games, but I don't think they're going to try that hard.
That's really interesting. I wonder if there's any stats to back that up, because I feel like a 1-year contract is similar. You know, we've talked about how players in their contract years generally do play better. Like you can prove that with stats that statistically they have a better year in a contract year. But I feel like a 1-year contract is similar. Like you're kind of showcasing yourself for all the other teams, and you know you're going to be a free agent. And so it feels like why wouldn't they?
No, but think about Lamar Jackson last year, right? And it's the same situation with these running backs. They're putting their bodies out there. They're getting hit more than any other players out there, these running backs and players like Lamar Jackson. Why would, if they're nicked up, why would they want to put their bodies out there again so that they can really be hurt in another year, right? Because they know the number of years that they're going to be signing a contract for is really not that much. And the power that they have to negotiate long-term contracts isn't there.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I definitely would want to. Maybe we can ask ChatGPT. We'll try to figure that one out.
Or at the same time, you look at the Le'Veon Bell argument as well too. He had a chance to. He was not happy with his contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sat out for 1 year. He was never the same. He has come back and said that he regrets that decision because that 1 year off did slow him down as well too. We're also looking at the same thing. Melvin Gordon he was a stud over in the LA Chargers. He has never been the same. That 1 year off does slow your body down, and you're just never the same.
Well, and that's the other thing in my mind too is, especially with the running backs, they know they have a really short shelf life. So to me, it's like you have a limited amount of time to make money. And like, I'm sure they build these 1-year contracts with tons of incentives. And so in my mind, it's like, you just got to max out like your ability to, because you lose a year, no matter what, you lose a year. And as a running back, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, I think for them, the preference is a multi-year contract, right? Yeah. If they can get a that's why a lot of these guys don't want to be franchised, right? Yeah, they might get like $11 to $15 million for a year if they get franchised, but they want that multi-million-dollar contract.
Yeah. Some of the things, and people were talking about, okay, how do we address the running backs in the future and all that stuff? The quarterback really kills your salary cap. So they've been talking about, should the quarterback itself be in its own separate salary cap, and then there's the rest of the team? Or is there a minimum that running backs need to have? So those are things, because the collective bargaining agreement really hurt both the linebackers as well as the running backs. And then mostly a lot of times the cornerbacks as well too. Safeties is more prioritized over the cornerbacks these days.
I mean, think about it. Look at all these backup quarterbacks and how much they're making. I would say 25 to 35% of the team's salary is going straight for quarterbacks.
Yeah. They were even saying, look at Carson Wentz, signed a $200 million contract. And then from that point on, Indianapolis was 28 last year for Washington Commanders, 22 million. That's more than any running backs will ever earn. And he's a backup quarterback.
No, did you know he hasn't even been signed? They haven't even signed him yet. So he's a free agent.
Just still sitting there.
Yeah.
Hey, Jed, Josh Jacobs, at the end of the day, what do you think is going to happen in Josh Jacobs?
Actually, I don't know. So he hasn't been signed. Is that what we're waiting on? I mean, I know he's like the 10th running back. So in my mind, that's somebody that I guess personally I would avoid. And not necessarily even because of the contract situation. I mean, I know he had the one good year in Las Vegas, but like, I don't know. That's just someone who I've always been skeptical of.
Yeah. Jim, one more thing, and then we'll talk running backs as well too. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers list Baker and Trask as co-QB1s. What do you think is the situation with Godwin? What do you think the situation with Mike Evans? Or are you putting all your eggs in Rashida White?
No, I mean, I don't think I'm that high on either of them, right? Like Evans had the last couple of games, I think the last 4 games he did really well. But for the majority of the season last year, he stunk. Godwin is actually, for where he's getting drafted on his potential, I think is the best one out of those folks right there. Because I think he's being drafted as 25 or 26 in terms of ranking. And so you can get a potentially pretty good receiver at in the 4th or 5th round.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about running backs as well too. It looks like the top tier of the running backs, it does come down, unless you guys disagree with me, Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey. Anyone disagree on that one?
Well, the only thing I would say is be sure we're clear when we're talking about standard leagues versus PPR leagues versus half point. So most of our leagues, I think, are half point, where you get a half point for a reception. And that makes a really big difference, particularly for both McCaffrey and Eckler, who, as we know, can catch out of the backfield. So that would be my only thing, because I think of Bijan Robinson, for example, if you're in a more standard league, I think some standard leagues have him as number one. So I think that's reasonable, given that you don't get the points for the receptions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jim, my only concern a lot of times with Christian McCaffrey is that in San Francisco, they love running the ball with multiple players. You have Elijah Mitchell that's coming back from injury. He's going to get his share. From that point on, you have Kittle's there. You also have Deebo Samuel, who could run the ball as well too. So in some sense, I actually will pick Eckler over that, because you know that Eckler's going to get the ball and run with it.
No, I agree with you. I mean, look at the stats last year, right? If you look at Christian McCaffrey back in Carolina, he was part of the offense about 80-something% of the time, roughly about 85%. When he went to San Francisco, it decreased to 65 to 66% of the time, right? And part of it is, if you look at Deebo, if you look at Elijah Mitchell, if you look at Kittle, he doesn't need to be as involved in the offense, so they're trying to keep him more protected. Whereas Eckler's there with the new offensive coordinator coming from Dallas. I could see him being even more involved in this passing game. So if I were to pick a 1 to 2, I still think they're in the top tier, but I would pick Austin Eckler first, and then also Christian McCaffrey second.
Yeah. Joe, would you say Bijan Robinson is clearly your third choice, no matter what happens? Is probably the third running back that you're picking?
Yeah, I think so. Right? I mean, here's who you're looking at. You're comparing him to Saquon Barkley. You're comparing him to Josh Jacobs. The only person that I think maybe potentially in that third spot would be a Nick Chubb. But Nick Chubb has not historically been part of the passing game, right? Because if you've noticed, when Kareem Hunt was there, Nick Chubb only did the bulk of the carries. Now, he's pretty consistent. Every year, he's usually in the top 10 of the running backs, but he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. And so I do think that a Bijan Robinson, with where he's at in the offense, should go number 3, and then maybe a Nick Chubb will go number 4, and then all of the other running backs, depending on what happens, can fall in place.
So I disagree. I would take Chubb over Robinson all day. Like, I think, and I hate that because I hate supporting the Browns, but yeah, I think the Browns are going to have an up year. You're going to see increases across the board and all their key players. And Chubb, I think you're going to see him get more of the receptions. He doesn't even have to get all of Kareem Hunt's receptions. Just a quarter to even a third is really going to bump his numbers. And I think the TDs even were an anomaly. I think you're going to see a bounce back. So for me, Chubb is a clear 3. And, honestly, I think, I think it's a clear tier at the top, though. I always like to think of any of the positionings, I like to think of them in tiers. And for me, the running backs is top 4. Any of those 4 with Bijan Robinson, Nick Chubb, Eckler, and McCaffrey, I'm comfortable with those being any of my top first round picks.
Well, I think I've been telling you, right, that I've been doing these mock drafts. I've been surprised where Nick Chubb goes, right? Because I think people look at him and says, look, he doesn't score much touchdowns. He only averages roughly about 15 points a game, which is pretty standard across the board. Yes, he's consistent, but he doesn't have that high ceiling. And I do think that with another year with Deshaun Watson, when you get to the goal line, Deshaun's going to run it in. I just don't think they're going to give Chubb that many more options or opportunities to run it into the red zone.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, if we were doing an auction draft, or if we were doing a dynasty draft, Bijan Robinson, how high are you willing to go up on Bijan Robinson if you were doing auction draft?
I think I go pretty high, right? I go pretty high. I mean, think about it, right? Like I was thinking about it. There's 2 or 3 players that I would look for. Anthony Richardson is one of them. I think I look at like a Garrett Wilson, who I think could potentially be a really good wide receiver. I would spend quite a bit on Bijan Robinson because I think he's going to be the focal point of that offense.
Yeah. Jed, how much do you love Bijan Robinson?
You know, I know every year there's a rookie running back that really, you know, changes drafts and changes leagues. And so he's definitely someone to go in. I mean, for example, if you're in a dynasty, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. My issue is just Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta is not a great team. And I know there's garbage points, but yeah, hopefully they're a little bit on the up and up. It's all going to come down to, of course, the quarterback.
Well, you don't think Desmond Ritter is going to be good this year?
Ritter, exactly. It all comes down to Ritter. I don't know. But I mean, Robinson is definitely a talent. He's going to get his points. And you like the youth. I mean, at that position, you know, it seems like the younger they are, the better they do. But I would take Chubb over him. Honestly, I have a little bit of hesitation with Pollard versus Robinson, even because I love Pollard. I mean, I think Pollard is going to be great. So it's a tough call.
No, I mean, my argument is with Bijan Robinson, let all the guys just sit there on auction draft, keep bidding on Bijan Robinson, and go sell him for $80, $90 because I'm saving my money for Jahmyr Gibbs from the Detroit Lions because I actually think even though he was drafted so high, he's going to be very good.
No, I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to be your next Antonio Gibson. You know, like I think there's a lot of hype around him, but I don't think he's going to really do. I think here's my thing: you can't beat a Bijan Robinson. He's going to vault up to the number 1 running back at some point. So I think he's worth the money. See, this is what Tommy's going to do. He's going to bid up Bijan Robinson, and I'm going to have to end up spending like $80-something on this player.
But at the same time, look, I mean, Amon St. Brown is going to be your stud wide receiver. They actually have a very good team over in Detroit. And then there's no Jamal Williams. There's no DeAndre Smith. Jahmyr Gibbs, unless maybe Montgomery will do well, which I think a lot of times early on, you're going to see the majority of carries over to David Montgomery. But toward the end, I think Jahmyr Gibbs will really outshine as the lead running back. Yeah. So, all right.
The Bijan.
All right, Jed, let me ask you a quick question. Now you go to the next tier, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Ken Walker, Alvin Kamara. All right, you see those guys, or you see running backs, or you see a tight end. Who would you pick or prioritize? Would you prioritize any of those running backs over a Jamar Chase? Would you provide over a Travis Kelce, any of the wide receivers?
Who did you throw in there? You said Pollard, Barkley, Taylor. And then who was that? I thought I heard you say a Walker. Was there
Ken Walker?
Who is Ken Walker? Who did you throw?
Seattle running back. He's a Seattle running back.
Oh, yeah. No, come on.
Yeah, he's that second-year guy who did really well last year in Seattle.
We all know
how much Seattle runs.
Yeah, Ken Walker is not even in the top like 15. Come on, man.
No. Well, so I don't think he's in the second tier. I would say he's in the third and fourth tier, but I've been reading a lot about the Seattle offense, and they were like, don't sleep on the Seattle offense. The only thing that you have to worry about a Ken Walker is they drafted Charbonnet really high. And Pete Carroll always loves a shared running back system, right? And so that's the only concern. But I actually think Ken Walker, for where he's drafted and what he's worth, I think you can pick him up in like $15, $16 and still get a pretty decent running back out of it. But I don't think he's on top tier of running backs.
Yeah, no, I'm not I mean, I like the Seattle system, the San Francisco system, great running back systems. You can get points out of him. I'm just saying he's not a second tier running back. Like to me, he's maybe a third tier. I would even say maybe a fourth tier in my mind. So that was the only thing. But yeah, so no, I already said I like Pollard. I would take Pollard over a Kelce. I think at a Barkley versus a Taylor, that's when I start thinking about a Kelce, or if it's funny how many people are sleeping on Tyreek Hill, like Tyreek Hill dropping because of, everyone's focused on Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Yeah. I love Tyreek Hill, man. I would take him there too.
Some people think, right, like they were looking at rankings, and some people said that Tua, right, if he's gotten bulkier, he's gotten bigger, Tua is actually a pretty good pick for a potential quarterback as long as you have a good backup. My only hesitation about this tier 2 quarterback, most of the people you have in this particular tier, Kamara, you had Jacobs, you got Barkley, you got Taylor. There's too many questions around it. And so are you going to spend all of that money? Are you going to spend a first round draft pick on these guys? Or would you rather go for the safe pick like a Kelsey or one of these stud wide receivers and then hold off for like somebody else later on, like a Ramondre Stevenson, Pollard, Etienne, or even like a Bijan, So I would wait. Like I'm so not into these second tier running backs right now.
Yeah, and I think that's fine to wait. I think what I'd say then is with those is you have to have multiple picks. So you gotta basically say I could get this wrong, so I'm gonna pick 2 of them. Like I'm gonna pick 2 running backs in the tier 3 or tier 4, and so hopefully one of them will hit even if I'm wrong on one.
Yeah.
All right. What about that Derrick Henry? How high are you guys on Derrick Henry then?
I like Derrick Henry. You all know, I'm a big Henry fan. I'm right here. I think he's top 10. Like, I think he will make it. So I'm fine. I think there's actually, it's going to be a little bit easier for defenses on him this year, but he's been so consistent. He's definitely getting up there. I'm just hoping this isn't the year that he falls off.
I mean, he is a free agent next year, right? 2024. So going back to your point there, I can see Derrick Henry as being one of those teams that says, look, I got one last chance for a big contract. I'm going to go for it. Because I think out of anybody in this group, Derrick Henry could potentially get a multi-year contract. But last year, he was number 1 running back for the first half of the season, and he just disappeared for the rest of the season. And so that's my only hesitation about picking him is when I need him, he's going to be gone.
Yeah. Jim, how much do you like Joe Mixon?
He's consistent, going to what Jed was saying, like I'm of the belief that, look, I'm going to try to draft a Travis Kelce or and another good wide receiver early on. And then maybe my middle of the road people are going to be an Etienne, a Mixon, a Walker, a Ramondre Stevenson. So that's really what I'm looking at because I'm so suspect of the top tier running backs.
Yeah, I like Mixon. I think Mixon is in a really good spot. They got rid of who was
it's Perine.
Perine. Yep, they got rid of Perine.
Which I think he's actually going to be pretty good in Denver. Perine.
Yeah, he's good. Former OU guy too. So I like Mixon a lot, but he's right in that spot where you're going to have to pick between him, Etienne, and your guy. I think Akers is going to be Akers. I think so. Yeah, Najee Harris is interesting. I think he might go a little bit earlier, but I like Mixon. I think Mixon is one of those guys I would roll the dice on. But again, I would want to pick 2 guys out of those tiers.
Jed, you mean Cam Akers, early MVP favorite?
Yeah. Akers has a really good chance. I mean, he's right in there. He's right in that 3rd tier, and I feel like he can jump into the 2nd tier pretty quickly.
Okay, let me tell you guys a trait that I think I'm going to kick myself. Last year, I was in first place, and I needed to win this particular league. And it's like a straight dynasty league. You only draft rookies every year. So there's only 3 rounds that we do. I traded for Joe Mixon, and I gave the guy Trevor Lawrence. And I kept my quarterback, Matthew Stafford. But I think Mixon's going to be consistent, but Trevor Lawrence is now number 4, number 5 in terms of echelon of fantasy quarterbacks. So I'm kicking myself right now.
Yeah. The only good thing I would probably say about that is every single year, look at all the stud quarterbacks that are always coming out. And so a lot of times, even this year or even next year with Caleb Williams coming on, you can easily pick one of those quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Caleb Williams, man, that guy looks like the real deal. I'd be curious to see how he does.
Oh, the one person I'm really excited about this year, 2nd year, technically 3rd year, but he really is 2nd year, Travis Etienne. I think under Trevor Lawrence and that entire team, he's going to have a great chance to shine, especially with James Robinson no longer in the mix.
Yeah.
So you're going to pick him over Cam Akers, or you're going to take Cam Akers over him?
You know what? I mean, as much as I love Cam Akers, I am concerned about Cooper Kupp. I'm concerned about Matthew Stafford, all of that stuff. So I would actually probably take Travis Etienne over Cam Akers.
Did you see the bets in Vegas? The team that is most likely to tank to go after Caleb Williams is Los Angeles Rams. So I can see them if Cooper Kupp's going to be out for a few more games, right? They're going to be like, heck with this season. We're going to go straight for Caleb Williams. We're just going to tank the rest of the season.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, let me ask you a quick question. If you had to pick between the 2 Philadelphia running backs, DeAndre Swift or Rashad Penny, who do you think is going to be a starting running back to own in between those 2?
Well, I was just reading the reports out of Philadelphia, and they said if you were to rank them right now, they're thinking they're thinking that what do you call it?
Penny.
Who's
Rashad
Penny?
Penny.
Rashad Penny.
Rashad Penny is 1, and DeAndre Swift is 1A, right? So they're thinking that most likely he's going to get the bulk of the carries early on, but I do think long term it's going to be DeAndre Swift. I just don't think that Rashad Penny. I could see him having a good game for 2-3 games, maybe 4, but I think it's going to be DeAndre Swift the rest of the season.
Yeah. Hey, Jed, what do you think? Even Carolina, a lot of times, who's the running back to own? Is it Chuba Hubbard or is it Miles Sanders?
Ooh, I think I want to stay away from Carolina regardless. I mean, I've always liked Sanders. Sanders was great in. Well, here's the thing with Sanders. Remember that it was really dependent on the quarterback. He played really well when Hurts was in. He played really well behind. So I think, I don't know. Honestly, I would try to avoid both.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm not. Carolina is one of those teams you want to stay away from this year. I think around where you can get Miles Sanders. Some people are going to draft Miles Sanders because of the name, I'm going to let them do it. Right? I'm going to stay away from Miles Sanders or even Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, Jim. In terms of the Chicago Bears, who's the running back for you to own? Is it Deontay Foreman, or are you looking at a Rashawn Johnson, rookie running back that was drafted by the Bears this year?
Yeah, see, I'm a Johnson guy, so. I know. I mean, Herbert's going to be fine. I think he's going to be serviceable. You got Foreman, who's going to hit in, but Rashawn Johnson, who was the backup to Bijan Robinson in college, I think is going to be the running back of the future. So, from a dynasty perspective, that's the guy I'm going after.
Now, what about Khalil Herbert? Is he even on your radar? I know you have now Khalil Herbert. You have now Deontay Foreman and Rashawn Johnson. Do you even like a Khalil Herbert?
I mean, I think how about this? If he was sitting there and I needed a third running back because I didn't draft any running backs early on, I would really consider Khalil Herbert because he's going to be the starter. But Deontay Foreman last year, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. I think he's going to – I just don't think Khalil Herbert is going to survive the entire season. That's one of the reasons, going back to Jed's point, I would not pick a Pollard over any of these other higher echelon running backs because Pollard has not shown that he can survive a full season.
Yeah. Jed, any of the Bears? I know a lot of times you're a fan of the Bears. Do you like any of the Bears running backs that you would even consider drafting?
Man, I like Herbert, but the fact that they brought in what's his name? I mean, it's going to be a split, right? They're going to split.
Deontay Foreman, yep.
Yeah, Deontay Foreman. So honestly, no. I think, and again with Fields, I mean, and you made a really good point, Jimmy, when we were talking earlier about Deshaun Watson taking touchdowns away from Chubb, and same thing with Fields. Fields is such a good runner; he's going to take a lot away. So, no, I don't think there are any of the Bears running backs that I'm going after.
I mean, I think with all of these things, right, we always have to ask yourself, who is the offense centered around, right? If you look at Chicago, it's going to be centered around Fields. If you look at Cleveland, it's going to be centered around Deshaun Watson. So as much as the running backs are there, my suspect is if the quarterback or a wide receiver is going to be the primary focal point of the offense, that limits the potential of the running back as well, too. That's one of the reasons why Bijan Robinson, I think, is even highly more regarded because the offense is centered around him. Eckler in San Diego, the offense is going to be centered around him and Justin Herbert.
Jed, let me give you 4 names and tell me which one you like the best out of the 4. James Conner, Dameon Pierce, Isaiah Pacheco, or Rachaad White of Tampa Bay.
Wow. Say that again.
Dameon Pierce, James Conner, Pacheco, or Rachaad White. Who do you like the most?
Out of that group, I think Pierce. Yeah, I think I would stick with Pierce out of that group.
Yeah. I would go with Conner. So, yeah, I would go with Conner. Conner, there's nobody else on the Arizona Cardinals. It's going to be Conner. Pierce has Devin Singletary, who's going to limit the red zone carries. Rachaad White, you don't know what's going on, right? Like he even had Tom Brady, but he was suspect, and I don't know what the offense is going to look like. And who's the fourth one we were looking at?
The fourth one is then Rachaad White, Pacheco.
Oh, Pacheco. Yeah. I don't know. Like those running backs don't really always hit the red zone. He had 2-3 really good games, but is he really going to be the focal point that Patrick Mahomes is going to go after, right? Because you got McKinnon there, and McKinnon kept taking all of the red zone carries from him last year, especially towards the end of the season. So that's where I was like, I don't know. Connors is your safest bet. The only thing is you better make sure you have some backup for him.
The only thing with Connors a lot of times is you have now Colt McCoy, who everyone knows is your backup quarterback. He is literally 5 yards here and there. He can't throw very, very well. And so everyone's going to stack up the line, and James Conner will just, it's not like he's fast enough where he'll elude some of these defenders. I think a lot of times he's probably going to end up just being stuffed at the line all the time.
I don't know, but like 2 years ago, 14 touchdowns. I know last year that he was injured and he only had less than half of that. But I still think with nobody else on the offense, like nobody, who else are they going to have to score touchdowns? I think it's going to be James Conner.
A couple of things, couple things before we wrap up. Jed, quickly, Jamal Williams, is he, especially with Alvin Kamara being suspended for 3 games, how high is Jamal Williams on your list?
Oh, that's interesting. You could do when you're kind of draft him, let him do well for the first 3 games, and then trade him away. That's not a bad move. I don't know. New Orleans is every year. I feel like New Orleans is really hard to figure out. So, again, personally, if you're gonna throw a late pick on, he's ranked looks like in the 30s as far as running back. So you could take a late flyer on him.
Did you see the news yesterday, guys, about the Saints? So the Saints had Kareem Hunt in the building, and rumors were they were going to sign him, right? Like they even started putting on. I saw a couple of things that says we're about to sign him. Colts came in, swept him off, convinced him to come and visit him, and they're most likely going to sign Kareem Hunt today.
Because they're offering him more money.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What does that do to Jonathan? That definitely knocks Taylor down. Then, if you said the Colts, right?
Yeah, Colts. That's why. Like they just signed. Let me see who else they signed. They signed. It was like somebody, but they are planning for life without Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Any last thoughts as we wrap up here?
No, just excited. It's getting really close. I feel like you're really starting to see a lot more activity and in social media and people posting, and so now is the time to be building your draft list. And again, I think I always say this, when you come up with your draft strategy, just do it by tiers. Like have these tiers, and then know you're going to target to get at least one player out of each of those tiers, and I think you'll end up okay.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I'm telling you, for me this year, my draft strategy is forget the top running backs unless I get Eckler. Other than that, I'm moving on. No, Chubbs, I enjoy. Bijan Robinson. If I miss on those guys, I'm drafting all running backs. And then I am waiting for Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm waiting for Cam Akers. I'm waiting for Travis Etienne, because if you don't hit on those top 3 running backs, forget it, because the other guys are too risky.
I agree with you, right? I'm looking at ESPN right now. 20 hours ago, the headlines was Jonathan Taylor is taking a leave of absence away from Colts training camp to rehab.
Wow.
Right. And so if you look at Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, I'm not spending a lot of money or high draft picks on those guys. It's just not worth it. You have too many really good 3rd and 4th tier running backs that are going to do even better than those 2nd tier running backs. So I say wait. Wait for, like what the time you said, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Bijan Robinson, Tony Ballard. I wait for those guys. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to see if we're going to record next week. I'm going to be gone, but I'm going to see if you guys are jumping on. So other than that, we'll stay tuned next week, because if we do, let's talk about either quarterbacks or wide receivers.
Sounds good.